Good morning, Shirley. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks a lot for tuning in. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about PPP, but the focus of today is some alternatives, financially for business owners outside of PPP. Shirley, I know you have some updates on the PPP program from your reporting. Could you give the group, to kick this off, some numbers in terms of the second wave of PPP and how that's been going?
Yeah, I predicted that, and others predicted that the PPP, the second round, would run out in a matter of days. And actually, it seems like there's still money. And I think the last report from the SBA is that there were 2.2 million loans given out, about 175 billion. Notably, the average loan size is much smaller this time, an average of $79,000. So that's an indication that the smallest businesses are getting access to capital. The last time in round one, the average size was about $200,000 or so. And as we know, in round one, there was a lot of criticism about big companies, public companies having access to this small business fund. So in Massachusetts, when you talk to some of the bankers, a lot of them have worked through their backlog of applications. With round two, when on opening day, last Monday, there were hundreds of thousands of applications already queued up. And there was a lot of problems that first day. I reported one bank that said that they had a team of 5 people working all day long, and they were only able to get 2 loans through that day. But by Tuesday, by Wednesday, everybody had worked. A lot of people had worked. A lot of banks had worked through their backlog. So that's good news. Definitely.
Yeah, we've heard from members of our small business community through Slack that a lot of them have gotten approved specifically through the second wave. So that's definitely positive. So we have a bunch of questions that came in ahead of the chat. I know that you actually have a question or two for the audience, and you're looking for them to potentially contribute to the discussion. So if you're looking to either ask a question or answer one of Shirley's questions, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. But Shirley, what's some of the information that you're looking to get from the group before we dive into questions?
Yeah, I put a note out on the Slack channel earlier this week, and thank you for all those who've responded. I think one of the stories I want to work on next is if you have a PPP loan, how are you spending it? When will you spend it? I know that, and some people are really excited to have their PPP loan. It is truly a lifesaver. But I've also heard from other businesses, it's almost like an albatross because the terms are very complicated. You have to spend it a certain way by a certain time. And so it might not be worth it in the end. And I think a lot of people, there's a certain segment out, a certain number of companies that are a little bit nervous about taking the money and spending it. So I want to hear from you. And I have a feeling it may be sector by sector. There might be sector by sector differences. Maybe some restaurants that have a lot of employees don't find it, the PPP, as advantageous. But maybe if you're a nonprofit or a small business and you have a handful of employees, it may really be a lifesaver. So that's what I'm looking for.
Definitely. So if you've gotten PPP, feel free to put your information or your story in the Q&A box, and then we'd be happy to talk about it. Or if you have a question about anything outside of PPP, that's the point of our discussion today. So one of the questions that came in, Shirley, do you know of any new grants that don't have to be paid back that have been introduced in the last week or so that business owners could apply for?
That's a good question. I think I just got yesterday from the city of Boston. They have this great handbook, and they've been updating it, looks like. And what I found is that there are funds that are being replenished. I think Eastern Bank and Citizens Bank is giving more money this week in terms of grants. I found that companies are incredibly generous this time around. Of course, nationally, like I think Facebook and Verizon, they've created small business funds, and I think a lot of it's been tapped, but I think you're starting to see another round of funding. So stay on top of it. Also, individual cities. Boston has a fund. I think Somerville also has a fund. So we're starting to see a lot of philanthropy, outright grants for small businesses. So definitely keep on top of it. And I think we're going to put that handbook in the Slack channel. Hopefully that will be a good resource for people. I think it's fairly long, right? It seems very very handy.
Definitely, yeah. We'll be putting that link in the Slack channel after this. One question about sole proprietors. We've have a couple in our small business community. We've been talking to them about PPP. Some of them are unclear about either the application process or some alternatives. So for independent contractors and sole proprietors, what are some of the alternative funding sources or anything that you've seen out there from your reporting on ways that these business owners, sole proprietors can either get a loan, get a grant, or generate more cash flow kind of through these times?
I only learned this recently. So a lot of sole proprietors weren't able to access PPP 1. I think the SBA delayed the guidelines for that. And so I think, what you're starting to see in the second round is a lot of sole proprietors able to get money. Now, one thing that's gotten a lot of attention, and I don't know if it's just for sole proprietors or for everyone else, but is the concept of employee retention tax credits. Some people are looking at that as an alternative to PPP because it's not a loan, and the terms of the tax credit are a little more forgiving and gives you a little more time to pay back, or not to pay back, but it gives you a little time to get that credit. So that's something to look into. We're one thing I wanted to say about the PPP is that there are a lot of rules around it. At one time there were 10-year terms for the loan, and that was very generous to small business owners. And at the last minute, the SBA changed it to 2 years. And we're living in unprecedented times. And I know there are a lot of groups out there, restaurant groups in particular, that are trying to lobby Congress and the SBA to try to change some of the rules. If you think about it, when Congress passed this package back at the end of March, things were so fluid and things are constantly changing. And so I'm hoping that through some pressure that there will be changes to the PPP that will make the program more advantageous or more better for small businesses. Because look what's happening in Massachusetts. We won't reopen I think you have about 8 weeks to spend the money, and by the time the economy might not even open up. But in the period that people have gotten their PPP, so they might have to give the money back, or they're too scared to spend it. And so I'm hoping that whether it's small, and I know you guys are busy, small business owners, but lobby your Congress, lobby members of Congress, get your trade association to work for you. Also, the other way that I've heard restaurateurs and small business owners, they're trying to get Congress and get the state to relax the rules on insurance. Many of you have probably applied, for business interruption claims with your insurance company and been rejected. But I think there's a movement afoot at the State House in Washington to change the rules so that you can get part of your claim. Just this week we saw Legal Seafoods, Roger Berkowitz. He sued his insurance. He twice filed in business interruption claims. His insurance rejected it, but he's now sued to try to get some of that money back. Wow.
Yeah, drastic times. You have to do what you have to do for what you feel is right. You mentioned kind of some of the challenges with the 8-week time frame. We had one business owner reply in the chat. They received the PPP on April 13th. They're only able to use about half of it because they can't reopen. And they've received no guidance from the SBA, still waiting on some guidance from the bank. Is this kind of along the lines of a lot of the stories that you're hearing from the community? And if so, what are some of the different ways? Obviously, hopefully you get the guidance from the SBA or the bank. But if you're not able to spend that money, what are some of the things that you're hearing about business owners doing to get it forgiven?
I mean, right now, I think you do have to be careful about spending the money because you have to pay it back. I mean, a lot of small business owners don't want loans, right? The margins are pretty tight as is. And so, and when they reopen, they don't know what business will be like. And so you don't want to, you already have a lot of expenses. You're still paying rent, you're still paying utilities. And so you don't want to overspend. And so people are being, I found that people are being conservative. I mean, they're not spending, they're only spending a fraction of their PPP. One owner I talked to is just spending it on health insurance for his employees. He has decided to pay for health insurance. And so that's what he's going to use the PPP for at the moment, because he doesn't want to pay the bulk of it back, because he doesn't think the revenue will be there by the time, Massachusetts opens. I mean, the governor, just to give you, this is my next column, the governor has said that, has this business advisory council that he formed. They're not reporting back till May 18th on whether, about details about how the Massachusetts economy will reopen. So you're thinking on May 18th, things are not going to return to normal. I mean, there won't be a reopening on May 18th. It's going to be after May 18th. And so, we could be looking into June until non-essential businesses opening up. So that's a long time.
Yeah, it's seemingly only gotten more complicated since PPP was first announced and released. It seemed like at surface level, a really positive thing, but the deeper you go, it seems like there's more and more, difficult decisions and stuff like that. We had one person tuned in who chimed in and said the state just created a Gateway City grant for small businesses. Do you know anything about that grant?
I don't know anything, but that's a good point. The state has been creating grants, so that's a good. We should definitely share that in the Slack channel.
Yeah, definitely. We can look into that more. We had another person answer your question at the beginning. I work for a nonprofit that got PPP, and we're still working, but with very reduced income. So it's been a big help. So this person's had, in the nonprofit space, a positive experience with PPP. I'm curious to know, because we've talked about PPP, a lot. It's a very important, program and whatnot. I'm curious to know, what successes have you heard from other, grant programs, if any, or loan programs from business owners kind of around the city? Have you heard of anything that you can?
People are just getting their money now, but is it the EIDL, the SBA EIDL, the disaster loan? Mm-hmm. It seems like that is more, that acts more like a grant. And so I think a lot of people have also applied for that. But it's very, when you talk to small business owners, outside the PPP, outside grants, people are talking about trying to change laws and trying to change government, trying to get taxes, meals taxes suspended. They're trying to push government beyond loans to help small businesses. And again, that's going to take the activism of small business owners at this time to push Beacon Hill to change laws. And I hear a lot about that, to try to, and you start to see some of those laws change already. Think about restaurants and beer and wine. They can now, the Beacon Hill passed emergency legislation to allow restaurants to sell beer and wine with takeout and delivery. If you think about how antiquated our liquor laws are, right? And yet in this pandemic, this happened fairly quickly. So it can be done. And so I'm thinking the next wave needs to look at what more can local government do, what more, whether it's the city of Boston, the city of Somerville, or Beacon Hill, what more can they do to help small businesses get back on their feet?
Definitely. And for the grant program, so the financing that does not have to be paid back, separate from PPP, are those application processes more competitive because of the non-payback kind of, structure? And then also, are they first come, first serve, or is there something that businesses can do if they're considering to apply, for a program outside PPP to, position themselves if it's not first come, first serve?
I mean, I don't know how other programs are structured, but they are very competitive. I remember interviewing a small business. They had applied for the Verizon, small business grant. And I think they told me that there were like tens of thousands of applications, for very few slots. So it is very competitive, but now again, as funds get replenished, there'll be more opportunity. And I'm hoping that as time goes on, small businesses, I'm hoping that more companies, or especially the big companies, or if you think about Facebook, or you think about Verizon, or these big companies depend on small companies, right? That the businesses, they need those small companies to survive. And so, even Citizens Bank, Eastern Bank, they're all giving money to help. Berkshire Bank also, there are a lot of foundations are giving money to help small businesses of all kinds, and because they realize that they're really important to the recovery, the economic recovery. So, but I would just say, and maybe there's a way we can create something on our Slack channel, kind of a running list of grants and loans and programs, and that could be a resource for local businesses here.
Definitely. We've talked with John Chesto a good amount the last couple of weeks about the reopening process, and I think that would be a good place to kind of end the discussion. We have a couple more people putting in kind of their comments as to your first question at the beginning about PPP. This person's an independent consultant and is the sole employee of an S Corp. Basically, he or she is saying they got their PPP funds last week and they're going to spend as much of the loan as possible on salaries and benefits in the next 8 weeks. So this person says their plan at that point is to pay back any remaining funds immediately. So it seems like this is the first that I'm hearing, even though this is the fourth or fifth discussion around PPP about businesses just giving the money back.
Yeah.
That has never been really a point of discussion in any of the webinars or conversations that we've had with business owners. So it seems like people are realizing that that's the best course of action if there's no use for the funds, or if the funds just go unused.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna hit up those people in the chat afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. No, we'll provide your contact and things like that. I know you're looking for individuals to talk to. So let's spend the last 5-10 minutes kind of talking about reopening, what that might look like, kind of some of the economic impacts. Obviously, retail, restaurants, those are two of the harder hit markets for small businesses around Boston. We talked a little bit with John Chesto yesterday about potentially some of the restrictions and how that might affect revenue. And I know a point of this conversation is around cash flow. So what are some of the expectations from the business side that you have kind of around the city that actions, price increases, hour expansions, whatever strategies business owners might take to ramp up revenue? What are some of those expectations that you have? And then from the consumer side, what do you kind of expect, because we all are consumers, in terms of, changes and things like that around the city?
I mean, when you talk to restaurant owners or shops, I mean, they are bracing for reduced revenue. I mean, they do not think that a light switch will turn on, when everybody is allowed to leave their homes, when the state and so let's just take a restaurant for example. People are bracing for only 50% capacity at a time. You're already starting to see that with grocery stores. I think it's 40% at grocery stores. So in what's also interesting is like we have some examples, nearby Rhode Island and New Hampshire. They're going to start opening restaurants very soon, and they're in the first phase. I think they're allowing outdoor eating, outdoor patios and people to sit down in outdoor patios first, and then they'll you can of course expect social distancing the tables, so that again is going to reduce your capacity. I've spent most time in writing about restaurants, but it gives you a flavor of some of the changes that will be coming, similar changes across other industries. Your business model is going to be different. I mean, if you did a lot on you know that people, not as many people will come back and eat in your restaurants. People will still be scared of the virus, but some people will come back, right? And so you have to retool your business. It's going to be more takeout, and less dining. Um, I've actually been very impressed when I talk to restaurants. They've been on top of preparing for opening. They have masks, for their employees. They have gloves. They have cleaning procedures, new cleaning procedures in place, social distancing. They're even starting to take temperatures of their employees. And so people have spent a lot of time thinking about what reopening looks like. My next column that I'm working on today is the impatience of businesses. I mean, you're starting to see, if you see what Charlie Baker's done, he's kind of bought time, with his advisory council and his plan. He said, well, they will come back, report back on the May 18th. But meanwhile, Rhode Island is opening up, New Hampshire is opening up. You're starting to see a bit of defiance in the air. You had the protests on the State House on Monday asking for a reopening of the economy. Today, the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce put out a report urging the governor to come up to detail criteria for reopening and to come up with a phased reopening plan by Friday, not the 18th, because if you wait till the 18th, that means you're not opening for much, you're not opening the 18th. It said they're urging the governor to move faster because employers need to prepare. And the governor has said we need 2 weeks to see, of declines in infections, declines in hospitalizations. Baker, by his nature, has been cautious. Throughout his first term and his second term, and I think people are getting antsy now. I think businesses are antsy. They want to get back to work. I mean, they want to get back to work safely, but they don't want. They want more planning. You're starting to see New York just came out with a plan. California's reopening. So we're in this very. I don't know, a very interesting phase of the recovery, because I think a lot of people a lot of people listened to the governor because they did not want the hospitals to get overwhelmed, right? And we did that, but now we know the hospitals won't be overwhelmed during this pandemic. I mean, maybe later on, but not at this moment. So we have this moment to really think about how to reopen the economy. And I think, and then also, of course, the warm weather gets people out, and people are truly getting cabin fever, and they're ready to figure out this economy.
Yeah, definitely. What do you see as kind of the Boston economy moving forward for, I guess Q2, parts of Q2, Q3, Q4, and then 2021? What's some of either the fallout or the rebound that you expect? Are there certain industries that you are expecting to be specifically hard hit, kind of permanently? Are there some that you expect to rebound faster than others? What's kind of your sense from your reporting?
I feel like this pandemic, this kind of virus-induced shutdown, has created kind of new economic winners and losers. If you think about it, grocery stores are doing really, really well. Amazon's doing really, really well. Restaurants like McDonald's and Dunkin', their sales are down, but it's not nearly as down as sit-down restaurants, right? A lot of them have shuttered. And so when I look ahead, I think about the hospitality industry. I think that's going to take a long time to recover. It could take, when I've interviewed experts, they say that when I say the hospitality industry, it's the hotels, it's the restaurants, it's the tour groups, it's the whole, kind of package or suite of businesses and organizations that are tied to it. It's going to take a while for people to get on a plane and travel to Boston, or business travel if you do the same thing. We're going to be hunkered down for a while. And when I talk to hospitality experts, they think it's going to take 2 years for the business to recover. And it's going to take longer than 9/11. It's going to take longer than the Great Recession. So and one of the questions you raise about the city of Boston. You know, I think that's one of the questions. Will the city of Boston be slower to reopen compared to the rest of the state? You know, you start to see some of that tension in California. You know, the governor's opening, you know, the California, but LA may take some time. You know, it's you know, the cities, you know, where the population is more dense and it's harder to social distance. It may take longer for a city like Boston to reopen its economy compared to, you know, other cities or suburbs of Massachusetts.
Definitely. And Boston's one of the more condensed cities too. It's only a couple miles wide, people on top of each other. Shirley, we've had a lot of people kind of telling us their story kind of through the chat. We don't have time to talk about everyone individually. If you're looking to get in touch with somebody, or if someone wants to speak to you about their PPP experience or otherwise, how can they get a hold of you?
Email is best. So SLEUNG@globe.com. And I've already heard from people earlier this week, and they had great stories to tell. So I can't wait to call them later in the week.
Yeah, definitely. There's been a lot obviously coming through the chat. And then some people are also asking about the Slack channel. I'll send out some information for those who have not heard about the Slack channel or know how to join. We have someone asking, can you please repeat your email one more time?
Oh, yes. It's SLEUNG@globe.com. Hopefully it's on my Zoom, like the last name is on the Zoom. Maybe next time we should just put the email on the Zoom.
Definitely, yeah. We'll get all the information out. We'll get the Slack channel out. We'll be putting the presentation deck type thing about the funding sources from Boston into the Slack channel. We'll get the information out. But Shirley, this was great. It was great to talk a little bit about PPP, but also, you know, things outside of PPP. So appreciate your time. I know you're on a deadline. We'll let you go. But thanks everybody for tuning in. And
thanks for having me. Bye, everybody.